Hi everybody! Welcome to week 10 of our English 3180 online course. Whew! It is Wednesday and there is a lot that has passed and a lot that we still don't know about our nation and the state of things. But there are some things that we do know, which is we're in this together, whatever this is. And for me personally, a big this that we're in together is our class. So I'm hoping that last week's mental health day and freedom was good for you guys, and I want us to continue on this semester being mindful of our status and our stress and ourselves. So that's just a little note from the teacher, I guess. To that end, I had two things to say before I jump into weekly business. And one is thank you. Thank you for your responses to the mid-semester assessment survey. I really appreciated it. And I've gleaned some good info from it. And I'm happy to say one of the common responses was a note about just the amount of reading we've had to tackle this semester, which I totally get. I even before we started the semester, I had pared way back. And now, in response to some of the feedback that you guys gave me in that MAP survey, I've pared back even more. So you'll notice that I've gone ahead and removed readings from every week remaining in our content-heavy weeks. Both for the fact of your feedback and also as I thought about it, I realized that I'm hoping that you are all starting your secondary research, if you haven't already, for your Project 3. Not Project 3, sorry, that's my other class. You guys are working on your curiosity-led research papers, which need secondary research. And this is the month, this is the time. I want to free up some space so that you can be able to read for that project as well. Whatever. The bottom line is we have less readings starting this week. So hopefully that also relieves a little bit of tension and pressure and can help us really focus on the good stuff that we are going to focus on in these next couple of Anyhoodle. I just wanted to say the thank you for the surveys and mention the revisions to the reading lists that are coming up. I am going to just say too briefly that our assignments this week are pretty standard. We're kind of jumping back into things with a reading response that's individual, a group discussion that is collaborative, and a quick check-in prompt. So one of the things that I will do at the end of this video is give you your chat check-in number 10 prompt. But I also just wanted to give a gentle reminder, because this is something that came up in the MAP surveys as well, is that if you are the person in charge of posting questions, please make sure that you post them in a timely fashion. And by that, I mean shoot for Friday, because we want to give the whole group enough time to fully respond to the prompt. And that means giving not just the answers to whatever questions you might pose as the discussion leader, but also being able to interact with fellow group mates and really further your ideas together as a group. So, gentle reminder about that. All right, and then aside from the discussion and the reading response, your chat check-in, we really don't have that much going on. So if you need to shoot me emails about your brainstorm presentations, I gave video responses to everybody. So you should have a little video of me talking through your ideas and giving some feedback. If you want to talk about your topic choice, if you want to talk about sources, if you want to just schedule a regular old Zoom meeting with me to sort of have like an office hours appointment with me, please, by all means, send me an email and we will set that up. Okay, so next I'm going to switch over to my screen share view so I can walk you guys through a mini lecture of this week's readings, and then I'll pull it back to the full view and give you the chat check-in number 10. Okay, So this week we are taking a look at Native American rhetorics, and we're continuing to move forward with our theme and goal of examining marginalized voices in the field of rhetoric prior to the 1800s. So, to that end, one of the sources that I kept for this week was the first chapter and the second chapter of the Wong book about Native American autobiography. And the reason I did that is because in the first chapter, she's going to outline some of the features of Native American autobiography and sort of establish the Venn diagram, the similarities and differences, if you will, between a traditional Western concept of autobiography and what autobiography or self-life writing means to the Native peoples of North America. So she's arguing for this redefinition for Native American autobiography because so much of what is actually there is not reflected in the traditional Western definition of the genre. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But one of the things she really also brings up is that this is needed because up until this point, any study that has gone on looking at Native American autobiographies are actually looking at not original Native American autobiographies, in the sense that she points out that scholarship often looks at solicited autobiographies that are taken down by non-native peoples and translated into a Eurocentric language. So she's going to argue that this is needed, that we need to redefine what a Native American autobiography even is, because Native autobiography, unlike Western traditional autobiographies, is not based in the Western notions of self, life, or writing. So if we're going to look at self-life writing for Native peoples, it is by definition different than what a Western interpretation of those words would be. So Wong is really going to put forth things that I think we all know or we should know. For instance, the concepts of self and even just the cultures of Native peoples in North America alone, to say nothing of, Central and South America. This is not a monolithic culture. This isn't Indians writ large, as Columbus erroneously called them. There's so many different tribes represented. Those tribes are broken into separate regions, right? So even thinking about Plains Native people in general, there's, like something like 10 to 12 different tribal nations represented in the Great Plains region. But even just thinking about maybe broad patterns within the Plains tribal people, those look and are essentially different than something like the Great Lakes tribal region and the multitude of tribes that are represented there. Does that make sense? So we're talking about the opposite of a monolith here. There's differing tribal notions, and in terms of, so like to say nothing of the fact that like the Lakota Sioux had a different concept than say the Ojibwe about self and culture and what it means to tell your story. Just in general, all Native peoples would share a more communal and more land-centered concept of the autobiography or the self-life story than any Eurocentric people would. So for example, there's some like specifics here, right? She focuses for a moment on the Navajo and how their language is verb-based, not noun-based. So there's a much greater focus on action and movement. Or, for example, the idea of self-identity as being a thing that is separate from community and something that almost belongs to oneself. The Hopi people would have multiple different names throughout their lifetime, and those names were communally granted. So there are just vastly more complicated notions of self, and they're different than a traditional Western notion of self. So this complicates thinking about Native American autobiographies, but as Wong argues, I think rather successfully, it's not impossible to classify and analyze this genre on its own terms. So she talks about at least 6 different subgenres that have been identified within the Native American autobiography. Coup tales, like counting coup, informal tales, self-explanations, self-vindications, educational narratives, and quests for vision or power. And these are all things that can be traced. And the reason why I had you guys read chapter 2 is because she provides examples of each one of these. But one of the things that I think is even more interesting is the multimodality of the Native American autobiography. Multimodal writing is something that's, to quote Zoolander, it's so hot right now, right? But once again, we're seeing the notion that it was a verbal, visual, performative, multimodal genre extant before colonists even arrived on these shores. So the multimodality, which has been a hurdle to scholars to understand this genre, I think our current notions about multimodality and how multimodal texts can be analyzed and assessed, this helps us now, I think, conceptualize the Native American autobiography and subgenres more accurately, because now I think we have more of our language, our scholarly language has caught up to some of these notions that were already in existence. So I just think that that's cool. All right, so then the other piece, I only had you read 3 pieces this week because, first of all, Melia Powell's piece is long. It's 40 pages. And I think it's got a lot of teeth to it. So she's going to talk about rhetorics of survivance, which is a term she kind of creates here. She coins this term. I love it. It's survival and resistance. And that's awesome. Something that many of us already have a lot of experience with, but I think especially folks who come from marginalized communities have more experience in this area of survivance. And I think it's important that Powell is pulling this out as a defining feature of how the authors that she's going to look at are going to use writing. So just kind of the 20,000 foot view of this article, she's looking at 2 written responses by Native intellectuals, Winnemucca and Eastman. And what she's going to do is she's going to walk us through these written examples. So in a sense, Powell's doing the opposite of what Wong is arguing for. So she's not trying to look at a multimodal performative text. She's looking at written text. So these are more contemporary Native writers. And she's going to look at their written text and she's going to be analyzing them to look for the difference, not just in deployment of maybe syntactical moves, but she's going to look at difference in terms of what the writing is trying to do, right? So she talks about it in this term, which I love, tactical refigurings. So she's going to look at ways in which these 2 writers are going to be tactically refiguring their use of English in order to accomplish their goals. And so she does a really nice job. It's actually, once you kind of know where the piece is headed, you can settle in and really look at the elements that Powell is drawing out of these 2 Native American writers and kind of like she's doing this really luxuriously detailed rhetorical analysis through both of the pieces. And it's pretty cool once you get into that groove. Okay, So that's all I have for our mini lecture. I'm going to pull it back to our full view and get us going on our chat check-in prompt, and then I'll close out this video. All right, so as you guys tackle this week's readings and do your smaller assignments, the chat check-in prompt that I'd like you to take on is just a quick question about what is one thing you will do this week to take care of yourself in the midst of what we know is turbulent still election season. And also I know that this semester is kind of, you know, like cresting into that final push. What are you going to do to take care of yourself? And I don't mean that in like a self-care sense of like, I'm going to get a spa because number one, we can't really go to the spa because it's not safe. And number two, I don't want to commodify it. Like, how can you be kind to yourself? Either by setting reasonable expectations. Maybe it's something as simple as like, I'm going to make sure that I take a shower and take care of my physical body. Maybe you're going to make sure that you eat some vegetables, or maybe you're going to give yourself some time to do some journaling to help you process thoughts that you're working on. Whatever. I mean, it doesn't even have to be those things, but that's the prompt for chat check-in number 10. And the cool thing is that once we have everybody's responses, we kind of have a little repository of cool ideas for how to take care of ourselves. All right. I hope you guys are having a great week. Give me a shout out if you want to talk about anything from the class, and I will see you in next week's video. Bye, everybody.